Hey guys, welcome to another video of our Crash Course series. In this episode, we'll be discussing various drivetrains that are used for every robot in the First Tech Challenge, and we'll be talking about a couple drivetrains that are traditionally used in FTC. And we'll also talk about ways in which you can choose a perfect drivetrain that matches your team's needs. So to begin with, the first type of drivetrain that we're going to talk about are tank drives. And essentially, each of the ones that we're going to talk about will discuss some pros and cons. And so, some of the pros of the tank drive is that it won't slip when it gets pushed. It has like a high traction when moving with the robot, a low traction turning, and it's also good for getting over obstacles when your robot is moving. So, essentially, this works because of its high pushing power that it has within it. And also, all three wheels are on the same motor, meaning that if the belt pops off or comes off, you still have control of the center wheel. So you won't lose complete control of the robot if anything happens to the belts. And it's also easy to learn, build, and it's very versatile and it can be used for a lot of things. But it also has some cons to it, which are like if the middle wheel breaks, the robot can't move, and so it can't strafe properly, and it takes up a lot of room on the sides and rocks back and forth with an unsteady platform because of the much room that it has around it. Now, for our second type of drivetrain, we have H drives, and H drives have also to them some pros and some cons. Some pros of H drives is that they have 5 motors instead of 4, and they use omni wheels and center wheels to strafe without turning. The strafes are put in a straight line with no drift, and the full power moves it forward with 4 motors, which is a lot of power to move across the robot over a distance. With these pros comes also some cons. For example, it's harder to balance because of its 6 legs, and it's side to side. It only has 1 motor, so it has one less motor to use in the competition, which might affect negatively when it comes to speed. This can't move in all directions, so it takes up a lot of lower middle space, and it has less traction, so it's very pushable in times. And however, this drivetrain is really infrequently used in FTC, not as often as other drive. Following up on this one, there are the X drivetrains, which are having some pros of how they're really simple to drive. They can strafe. They're very, very agile. And with that agile feature, they are very smooth to drive with and they switch directions really easily. So even if it moves really smoothly, it has some cons to it, such as it being pushed really easily, and if the motors are off, the strafing will be off as well. And this all comes together to reduce power in all directions. So there's less of a pushing force and it's very low, so it can't clear all the obstacles that come in the way. And since the wheels act in pairs, if one of the wheels breaks of the robot, it might not perform well. And sometimes when it will rotate a lot when you're driving because of the easy movement and smooth driving, like we just discussed about. So the structure on the bottom won't be as strong. And this follows up with another drivetrain, which is Mechanism wheels. And these have the pros of having unlimited strafing capability, full power, which goes forward, a bit less to side by side, but they have more room in the inside and more pushing power than the X drives that we just discussed about. Even though they have these pros, some of the cons of this is that sometimes this drive sometimes drifts while strafing, so it's pushable and it's hard to get traction when clearing an obstacle. So wheels operate in pairs. If one breaks, you can't move right, and it slides and skids on ramps when it's moving. And so if a motor breaks, the robot doesn't work well. And it usually, like I just said, slides to the side or to the left. And so it really needs good wheels. And it can get the accurate readings of the encoders for auto because of this really smooth movement that doesn't stay intact and in place. Now we come to our last type of drive, which is the swirl drive. And these drives can strafe, they can strafe and rotate at the same time as well. And they have a lot of traction, so they can push really well, and they're not too they're not too pushable at the same time. So they can push, but they're not too pushable in a way where they might lose focus or might not stay in place. And they only use four corners, so it's really good at clearing obstacles and has more power on certain directions than the X and Mechanism wheels. With this comes some cons of how it's really risky with these, and because just for the fact that it's hard to design and make, and it needs powerful servos, or else it will burn out many of the servos. So it needs brushless servos, and mostly it needs to be custom. So higher off the ground, it needs to be more complex, and there are more parts to break when it comes to using these, and you have to replace or kind of change up the design when using these just because of the solid structure they have. So if the motor stalls, the server may take some of the torque, and it's harder to learn how to drive it as well with all these problems. There's an observable lag of the wheels turning and making it even harder to program overall. So it may sink into the foam tiles and see powerful servos. So the servo braking is a really bad aspect of this whole process. So when your team chooses a drivetrain, you want to make sure that you choose one that fits your team's needs. So this depends on a few factors, such as one of them being money. So it's really important to spend money and your finances according to how much you have. So essentially probably creating a budget for yourself beforehand on how much you think you can spend on this component of the robot. And this comes in with like a second factor, which is time. So, time is something you should really come to addressing within your process of choosing a drivetrain because maybe, for example, depending on how much time you might have left until a competition is going to happen, you might want to invest in a more expensive one or one that's easier to work with so that doesn't delay your work time. And according to your resources available is another factor. So you want to check if you have the resources available to you, meaning, for example, like the spare drives, you have the resources needed to design and make these drives. With a larger complexity and possibly also having more time to program a component might lead to difficulties along the way, just in time constraint and the resources you have. So all these also tie in with a common factor, which is skill level. So something else which is crucial is skill level because it essentially refers to defining a person's knowledge on a particular subject, and this attributes to a person's level of experience in the area of using this component or anything they're building. So, like for example, for the mechanism wheels, since it's hard to get a traction when clearing an obstacle, it would be to a team's benefit to learn or acquire basic knowledge or choose ones that are to their skill level so they can easily use that drivetrain. And all these also come under like other commitments. So this ties into factoring in the importance of considering any other commitments, such as other complex mechanisms that require time and money into your selection process, because depending on how much is spent on the others, you should use the factors that were just discussed to accurately evaluate and find the one that's best for you and your team and the needs of your team. So your drivetrain should be the first thing that you look for or work your team works on for the robot. And our team has normally done it before the season started off season. And you could also try doing that as well. And Yeah, that's the end of our video, and thank you so much for watching. And please subscribe to Ink and Metal, and we hope you like the video.